Everyone by John T. Wood. I will present you parts of myself slowly. If you are patient and tender, I will open drawers that mostly stay closed and bring out places and people and things, sounds and smells, loves and frustrations, hopes and sadnesses, bits and pieces of 3 decades of life that have been grabbed off in chunks and found lying in my hands. They have eaten their way into memory, carved their way into my heart altogether. You or I will never see them. They are me. If you regard them lightly, deny that they are important, or worse, judge them, I will quietly, slowly begin to wrap them up in pieces of velvet like worn silver and gold jewelry, tuck them away in a small wooden chest of drawers, and close. Now welcome our Ignite Master of Ceremonies, Jason, economist.
Okay, thank you. That was beautiful. Good. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jason, economist. Honored to be here with you today. I'm an actor, a teacher, a human being. I'm from the planet Earth. We all share that together. I'm very honored for the first time ever, the IMSH is having its own set of Ignite Talks. We have a fantastic group of individuals that we've selected from all over the globe, all different backgrounds, different trainings, both within simulation and outside the society. It's been a total privilege to get to know them over the last couple months and hear their stories, and I can't wait for that to be shared with you. I want to clarify, Ignite Talks have become very popular. It's a format where the storyteller is only allowed 5 minutes, and a traditional Ignite Talk, there are slides that automatically just rotate every 20 seconds. So to be clear, we're not doing that. We're using Ignite, the spirit of that word, as an inspiration to you in this conference. Some of the folks will be using slides, others won't. But what's common with all of them, I think, connects to a little story that I'd like to tell you right now. This is a story about 4 people named everybody, anybody, somebody, and nobody. There was a very important job to be done, and everybody was sure that somebody would do it. It was a job that anybody could do, but nobody did it. Well, somebody got angry about that because it was everybody's job, but nobody realized that everybody wouldn't do it. And eventually, everybody blamed somebody because nobody did what anybody could do. And finally, it came to pass that somebody woke up and decided to do what only that particular somebody, that he, that she, that you, that me, could do, and began. And the folks that we're going to bring up here are all somebody. And I'd like to submit to you as a society, I'm very honored to help host this. This is really for you to realize that every person in this room is not here by an accident or a mistake. We all have a story. I think simulation itself lends itself to story so easily, and it's a beautiful marriage of storytelling and healthcare. And I want to make sure that everybody in this room knows going forward through this conference that your story, your voice, your experience as a human being, that's the gold that we're after. And when we're willing to share that and take off our mask of our titles and take away those barriers, amazing, amazing things can happen. Amazing potential is right in this room when we decide to be our real selves in front of each other and share who we really are. Okay? Sound good? Hello? Is anyone there? Okay, she's awake. He's awake. Okay. All right, very good. We are so glad you're here. We're going to get started. These are folks that are going to talk about things from the mundane to the life-altering, and lessons and insights that they've all been able to gain out of those experiences, and we're here to share them with you so that when you go forward this week, you know that all of that's inside you as well. So we're so glad you're here. Enjoy, and we'll get started with our first storyteller. Thank you so much.
I returned to Boston last October on a flight from San Diego. I was about 30 minutes early. I was really excited. I was going to be able to make the tango class I thought I would have to miss. I hopped in a cab, took me to my parking spot, which is in the garage next door to Mass General Hospital. Hopped in my car, shot out from the garage, went down a side street that crosses over in the front of the hospital. In the middle of the street, 3 guys were standing. One of them is about my height, probably around 40. He was kind of muscular. Without looking, he started to step into the street. I was going along that street, and he stepped in. I think he suddenly looked to the left and realized I might hit him, and he jumped back. Now, I am an ultra-polite driver, but in this case, I was in a little bit of a hurry. They were jaywalking. There was no pedestrian crosswalk, so I kept going. I turned down another side street, past the outpatient center, but I had to stop behind a line of cars. Then I noticed in the rearview mirror, this guy who had stepped off the street was coming from behind me. He came up to my passenger window and looked in. I powered the window down, and he said, "This is a hospital zone. You are going too fast. I've got your license number." And my heart started to race. He walked away. He just walked off. I think he was probably going to the T to go home. My heart was racing, thinking, this guy's a nutcase. I mean, he was the one who was stepping off jaywalking. I'm sure if there was a security camera, it would show this. What's he going to do? Call the cops? So the traffic starts to move. I go out into the street, start driving toward my class, but my mind's racing about what I might have said. And then I stopped and thought, wait a second, why am I letting myself get so upset about this? I shouldn't be reacting like this. And I got into my metacognition. I started reflecting, and taking a page out of Daniel Siegel's Mindsight, I realized I'm in my limbic system. I've got to get up into my frontal lobe, and I did. And I started to process this and started to use it. And I thought, geez, maybe there was something to learn from this guy. And actually, I realized I was going slower, and I was more aware of everything around me. Maybe this crazy guy had a lesson to teach me. Maybe I could use this feedback. And I processed that up until the class and thought about what I could do, what I could learn from this. And I wonder, where did that come from? Why was I able to use the feedback in this way? Feedback that had been given to me in the worst way possible. And yeah, I'm a lifelong and obsessive, probably neurotic learner, but I think a lot of where this comes from is my life in simulation, these decades, over 2 decades of working in simulation, and in particular, the whole craft of debriefing, of thinking about debriefing, thinking about how we share with our students our curiosity with them and how they can learn. Simulation is an incredible tool that you all have, that we all have, for helping our students learn in this way and learn how to both give and receive feedback. We do a lot of teaching about giving feedback, I think, but not about receiving. And what I realized, and this probably came from the book by Stone and Heen, Thanks for the Feedback, that it's really much more important to learn how to receive feedback. It's a lot easier to give it, a lot tougher to really receive it. So I wasn't really feeling too good about this whole situation. I wasn't crazy about the way I reacted, but at least I had gotten into my head, I had gotten metacognitive. But what would I do about the adrenaline-induced behavior? How could I control my limbic system more? What would it take to do that? If I feel like it's our job to teach our students to de-escalate situations like this, what's the problem when I can't always do it myself? So I obviously need some more simulation. I need to learn more. This is a real challenge for all of us in simulation. Now, I'm a patient safety guy. I came to simulation from patient safety. And I know that systems are really important for patient safety. We have to create great systems. But it's equally important for us to create great relationships, to get clinicians and all healthcare providers and workers to learn how to work together and how to share together, in particular, how to give feedback to each other and how to receive feedback. So if you have some feedback for me, I'd appreciate it. I'm almost looking forward to the next opportunity I have to challenge myself to see if I can pull it off, to control that limbic system better. And if you have that for me and want to share it, please do. But it's okay to be nice.
Speaking after such a great speaker like Jess Cooper is always challenging, especially I'm an Asian guy from Japan. Thank you, Christine, all at IMSH staff and attendee to let me talk in this great opportunity to share my experience. My name is Tak Shiga. I am an emergency physician from Japan and also a simulation educator. I was trained at Mayo Clinic and Harvard Medical School. My topic today about negotiation. In 2006, I moved to Rochester, Minnesota from huge, big Tokyo, as you saw in the picture. Obviously, it was a big transition. Moving into a new environment, always tough for anybody, but it was especially so to me because I was moving into a whole different country, language, value, and culture. Because of that, my first year of emergency medicine residency was so tough, challenging, but I was able to survive somehow. When I was second year emergency medicine resident, we had a great session about negotiation through simulation. It was provided by Dr. Luck and Dr. Goyal, my mentors. Because of this wonderful immersive learning, my notion about negotiation was totally different after that. Prior to the session, my perception about negotiation is almost manipulation. In addition to that, coming from different culture, I was tied with different point of view. In Asian cultures, to have upfront conversation about what we want to have is considered to be rude. Because of those, whenever there is an opportunity of negotiation, I always need to struggle. However, after the session, my notion about negotiation was totally different from manipulation to get the common goal. Immediately after the session, I worked a shift with Dr. Luck. We had a very sick 22-year-old male came to the emergency department because of fever and altered mental status. Everybody was concerned about meningitis. Dr. Luck and his resident performed lumbar puncture to have CFS sample to treat him. However, it was difficult initially. With my previous experience coming from different country, I offered to do this procedure in different way. However, it was decided the patient was sent to radiology suite to have this procedure by intervention radiologist. It was then I wanted to have assertive communication to have win-win goal. I called radiology to find out how long does it take for an on-call physician to come to hospital. Okay, it's 30 minutes. Then I turned back to Dr. Lark and asked, please let me do this procedure. I'll finish within 30 minutes. And the answer was yes. I was able to perform procedure within 30 minutes successfully. I was happy, Dr. Lark was happy, perhaps patient is happy, and no additional bill was sent to anybody. We do simulation to change someone's behavior, someone's life. Dr. Lark and Dr. Goyle certainly did it for me. Because of them, I decided to do fellowship in medical simulation at Harvard under Dr. Gordon, Hayden, and Cooper. Simulation, negotiation seems different, but they have something in common. It's all about communication. And I want to ask, what is communication? For me, it's not manipulation. It is opening our minds to exchange each other's hearts. Thank you.
It was 2004, one of those typical foggy San Francisco nights, and my first shift as a midwifery student. My stomach was churning, my heart was pounding, and my palms were sweating. What would it be like? Would the patient know that it was my first time? What if I dropped a baby? My chief comfort in those moments leading up to the shift was that at least I would have an experienced teacher by my side at all times. Maria was having her first baby. She was sitting uncomfortably in the bed with her husband, and the midwife said, "It's going to be hours before she has her baby. You stay here with the patient. I'll go check on the other patients." And then she left us alone in that dark room. One contraction later, Maria gets out of bed, and I suggest, let's raise the bed, you lean over it, and I'll rub your back. 2 contractions later, she says, "I can't close my legs." Now, I'd never caught a baby before, but some little voice inside me said, if a woman says that she can't close her legs, it's probably because there's something preventing her from doing that. Perhaps the head of a baby. So I take a look and I see a black spot and I think, okay, I need help here. And then I make a critical mistake. There were lots of options I had in that moment. I could have yelled out, "Help, we're having a baby." I could have sent the dad to go get help. I could have yanked the emergency cord from the wall. But instead, I turned my back to the patient and walked to the door. I said to the midwife at the desk in the calmest way possible, "I think the baby is crowning." And then, without assuring that my message was received, I turned around. Maria, at that point, had not, in fact, sat down in the bed. She had her back to the bed, was standing up, and looking at me in the doorway. Not exactly sure what I heard or saw in that moment, but I felt my body hurl itself across the room, running, sliding, and eventually catching the baby's head with the sheet right as it was born. The next seconds went in slow motion. The midwife at the desk walked in, and without surveying the scene, she said, "Don't forget your gloves." And there I was with the baby's head in my hands, and I said, "I think it's a little too late for that." And at that moment, as I said that, the baby's body slipped out and I caught it 2 inches from the ground. Shaking, I brought the baby up to Maria, and as she leaned against the bed with her 8-pound baby still attached by the umbilical cord, she said, "I want to cry, but I just can't stop laughing." We were all shaking and laughing too, and all's well that ends well, and the baby and the mom were fine. I, however, never wanted to go back to the hospital again. I had a teacher who criticized me for having turned my back on the patient and for not having done all of those things that I should have done to mobilize the team: call for help, send the dad, pull the emergency cord. But 6 months later, I'm sitting in the nurse's station, and in walks Maria and her baby. We lock eyes. And even though I only knew her for those brief moments of her birth, we recognized each other, and spontaneously, we both just started laughing. Stepping back from the situation, it's clear the cognitive, behavioral, and technical errors. However, there was one thing I did do right. That was make a human connection. And as we all in this room know well, simulation is not only the key to addressing the conditions that create medical error, but also an effective means for improving the quality of human-to-human interaction. There are 3 million preventable maternal and neonatal deaths annually in the world, the majority in low-resource settings with high patient volume and undervalued and disheartened providers. Imagine all the lives changed if humanized simulation was deployed to all providers of birth and labor care. And this is exactly what we're seeing as we take low-tech, high-fidelity simulation to rural clinics and providers. The doctor in Mexico can improve his skills. The team in Guatemala can correct long-standing systems errors. The nurse in Kenya can practice kind and respectful care in the face of high volume and stress. And the midwife in India can implement team communication. I believe that we can bring the humanity back into healthcare by making simulation accessible and more human. I learned from Maria that it was the human connection we forged in a moment of stress that endured. Simulation that acknowledges the humanity of our patients and the providers who care for them can create transformative life experiences that will improve patient outcome and increase kind and respectful care. Oh, and one more lesson: always carry gloves. Thanks.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It was 1:30 on the morning of a day in 1983. I was a first-year surgical resident with all the hopes, aspirations, and ambitions that go along with it. I was rotating through cardiothoracic surgery, a subject which I've never liked, and was charged with doing bedside monitoring for a 28-year-old patient who had undergone a closed mitral valvotomy earlier that day. At the time, we did not have any of the modern monitoring equipment with fancy screens and fancier alarms. Monitoring this patient essentially involved my sitting at the bedside of this patient, watching the patient, and watching the monitor for any issues. I had been on call the previous day as well, and I was tired. The patient was simply refusing to settle down. He was restless, he was pulling out his intravenous line, he was pulling off his oxygen, he was sweaty, and the more this went on, the more exasperated I was getting. I began resenting his unreasonable behavior in not allowing me some well-earned rest. When I finally had enough, I gave him a healthy dose of morphine with the hope of inducing some sleep. And sleep he did, but unfortunately the sleep was of a more permanent nature than I had bargained for. I called my consultant. My consultant came over to the intensive care unit. He looked at the notes, he looked at the charts, and he turned back to me and he uttered those words which are still haunting me today. He said, "You have killed this patient." It took a few days before the full import of what he had said sank in. I went through the usual defense reaction of resentment at his heartless comment, and then later a feeling of guilt when I realized that there was definitely a lot of truth in what he had said. This was followed by depression and loss of self-confidence in my decision-making abilities. These feelings have gradually faded with time, except for the feeling of guilt. Time has blunted it, but I'm not able to shake it off. To my mind, this event was excusable. After all, I had been on call 2 days in a row. I was tired. I was inexperienced. I had probably been put into a situation which was beyond my capabilities to manage. I was not the first one to make this mistake. I may not be the last. So perhaps, yes, this was excusable. But I would be the first to admit that this was definitely not justifiable. What happened to this patient should simply never have happened, no matter how many excuses I had. How has this event impacted my life? This patient died simply because I alienated myself from him. I did not consider his problem. Rather, I considered him to be the problem. I did not look at things from his perspective. If I had, I would have realized that he was not meaning to irritate me. He was not deliberately being uncooperative. He was sick and he was hypoxic. And he required a caring physician to understand him, to manage his condition appropriately. Unfortunately for both of us, that crucial night, he had me instead. I find that empathy towards patients is a very cultural thing. In developing countries such as India, where I have practiced most of my medicine, society is very paternalistic. There exists a social divide between us and our patients, as you can see from this slide. This is a typical doctor-patient relationship in India vis-a-vis the developed world. I have sensed in myself a different degree of empathy when the patient is someone I can relate to, somebody similar with a background similar to mine. I want to honestly put it to all of you as well. Don't you get more affected by the daily tragedies of life when they hit closer to home? They are much more tangible as a result, and not some abstract series of casualty figures in a place we barely know of and consequently barely understand. I, on the other hand, have learned my lesson. It shows itself not by any major change in my behavior, but in simple, small, day-to-day acts which are by themselves quite unremarkable. Smiling at strangers more often, for example. The extra 10 minutes I take to guide people who are lost, maybe even walking part of the way with them. The pains I take to make sure the patient has understood the treatment I'm about to give him, not because it's my duty to do so, but because I care. After that incident, I must confess, I have killed several other patients during the course of my surgical career. But none of these has stayed with me the way this patient did, for the simple reason that in my ignorance and arrogance, I did not put myself in the patient's shoes. I did not see it from his viewpoint. I have now learned to look at things from the patient perspective. It has taught me empathy in a way no amount of study or workshops or simulations could have, with due apologies to the audience. It has taught me to look at patients as other human beings with their strengths, weaknesses, feelings, and personalities. It has taught me to understand my patients better in order to take better care of them. I have come to believe that taking patients for granted is a prelude to carelessness in their management. I have learned that compassion is not only a desirable human trait, but also affects clinical outcomes positively. In short, I have learned to genuinely care and to genuinely feel. I only wish I did not have to pay such a high price for this lesson. Thank you very much.
On May 5th, 1961, Alan Shepard became the first American astronaut. It was my 7th birthday. I was watching. A few years later, I was launching my own, much smaller rockets. I was an aviation and space geek, and I still am. I went to Northwestern University to study biomedical engineering. I lived next door in Sargent Hall. I learned a lot of things in engineering that turned out to be useful in developing a simulator, but I also did a lot of really stupid and crazy things in college. I went to medical school at Yale, and for a summer I had my own lab. I did my residency at Stanford, and I joined the faculty where I had another lab. But actually, I was still an aviation and space geek. And I saw the parallels between anesthesiology and other things in healthcare and fields like aviation and space travel that used simulation extensively. I thought that healthcare needed simulation for research, assessment, training. So we decided to make a simulator. Being a geek came in handy. I had a student in my lab, Abe DeAnda, who was also a geek, electrical engineering from Stanford. Together we produced a prototype simulator and then several versions of a first-generation device. We cobbled together things, and where necessary, we built them. It actually turned out to be very handy that the first electronics supermarket, Fry's Electronics, was just a few miles away. That's Steve Howard back there. He was a resident. He joined us for this journey. We created the Anesthesia Crisis Resource Management course adapted from cockpit or crew resource management in aviation. And with medical student and master's in engineering, John Williams, we created a second-generation simulator. This was eventually commercialized by CAE Link. A few years later, Kyle Harrison joined us. We avoided paralysis by analysis. We subscribed to the Nike philosophy of just do it. We worked really hard, but we also had a really good time. Over 25 years, we've tried to spread healthcare simulation and CRM-oriented training across the nation and then across the world. But turning the massive ship of healthcare toward these goals has turned out to be very difficult. And we all need to be in this for the long haul because this is a many decades proposition. I'm in my 4th decade of simulation now, so I'd like to share just a bit of my integrated vision of simulation in healthcare. We need to think of simulation not as a one-shot deal, but as a career-long, repeated, frequent exposure using all modalities and techniques woven into the fabric of healthcare. I like to say that in this vision, a clinician can't stop engaging in simulation unless they retire or die. That's the way it is in aviation and nuclear power. Now, everybody is asking for the evidence that simulation saves lives. And no doubt, long, complex, expensive studies could help answer these questions. But unlike with pharmaceuticals, there are no deep pockets to pay for these studies. Actually, I think most of us believe that simulation has already saved hearts and brains and lives. It's hard to prove that definitively, but convincing stories abound. And actually, there's a saying that's so good, it occurs in both the Hebrew Talmud and the Muslim Quran, that whoever saves a life, it's as though he had saved all mankind. So collectively, we've saved mankind a few times over. And that is why we all continue this quest to innovate, develop, and disseminate simulation in healthcare. And that is why we are here, 3,000 strong, at the 16th Annual International Meeting on Simulation in Healthcare. Well, what a long, strange trip it's been. But you know, it isn't over yet. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Aharoni, and I'm going to speak to you about how dying saved my life. I was Indiana Jones. I was looking for my next Temple of Doom, and as an actor and a volleyball player, I traveled the entire world looking for the new, sparkly, better, different, shining example of what my life would become. But something wasn't right. Something was missing, and every new adventure brought me back to my crappy apartment with the 4 other guys I was sharing it with, and my girlfriend was awesome, but maybe I should just head back to Hawaii where I was born and raised. I needed something. I needed a change, and I got it. I died. It was a normal day. The night before, I went out for dinner and a movie. And I saw that movie, Music and Lyrics, with Hugh Grant. And ironically, the title song was My Heart Skipped a Beat. And that should have tipped me off that something was about to happen. I was playing a volleyball match the next morning, the same way I had 1,000 times before. It wasn't hot. It wasn't cold. I was winning, as usual. And I looked at my volleyball partner, and I said to him, something's not right. I don't feel good. And about 10 seconds later, I fell into the sand, eyes wide open, face first. They started chest compressions and continued CPR until the paramedics came and defibrillated me and took me to the hospital, which this is the change I got, but that's definitely not the change I was looking for. Be careful what you ask for. Lesson number 1 for me is be careful if you're applying CPR. I was told that after 3 minutes, the victim is guaranteed brain damage. After 7 minutes, they're not coming back, and if they do, their life will never be the same based on the damage that was caused. I was down for 10 minutes, and according to my sister, we'll never know if actual brain damage occurred because I'd have to start using my brain first. But seriously, please continue CPR if you ever have the opportunity until the response team comes. I may be an exception to the rule, but thank God I'm still here. There was a book that I read when I was a kid called Fortunately, Unfortunately, and my experience in the ER was a lot like it. Fortunately, I was going to see Grandma, and she always had ice cream and cake. Unfortunately, a dark cloud appeared, and it started pouring rain. Must have been an El Nino year. Fortunately, I was returning Granny's umbrella to her, and I stayed dry. Unfortunately, those clouds were so distracting that I fell off a cliff. Fortunately, there was a body of water under me. Unfortunately, there was a hungry whale in that water, and the rest is sort of history. At the hospital. Fortunately, it was a beautiful, sunny Southern California day. Unfortunately, and I was playing volleyball, of course. Unfortunately, I suffered from full cardiac arrest outside the hospital. Fortunately, I beat the odds and I survived. Unfortunately, my brain turned into mush and it was on a short-term memory 24-second reset. It was a little like Memento. I could meet everyone again and again after every 20 seconds. Fortunately, that memory reset only lasted for 3 days. Unfortunately, when I came out of it, I had been given a positive urine screening for cocaine. They were going to transport me to what my family calls the druggie ward. Guys, me. If there was cocaine in wheatgrass, there's a pretty good chance that I had it in my body, but other than that, I'd never seen it except for Scarface. At that ward, they were going to give me a stress test, put me in an unmonitored bed, and send me home the next morning. Definitely not the optimal situation to survive what I did. Which brings me to lesson number 2. Always, always have someone advocate for you who loves you at the hospital. Thanks to remember that girl in the beginning that I was getting away from? She stuck by me for 3 days, never left my side. Thanks to her and a few other guardian angels, I was transferred to a different hospital. They redid that drug test, and guess what? No evidence of cocaine, in the first one or the second one that they took. I got a new team of cardiologists and the best care possible, and it prepared me for my new life. What, you ask, is part of that new life? It was scary to come back from something like that, and thank God for that team of doctors and supporters. But at the same time, that fear gave me something profoundly grateful for absolutely everything. I mean, I would go to bed at night and pray that it wouldn't leave, because I could see the leaves moving in the trees. I could see the crest of the wave. I would walk into the soup aisle at the supermarket and just be so happy that I could pick alphabet noodles or stars or whatever it was. It was the most amazing thing, and I never wanted it to go away. But it did. And you know how I knew it did? Because when I got on the 405 and that jerk in the BMW, you know the one, cut me off, instead of giving him one finger, I probably gave him two, and if I had a third, I might have even given him that. But something didn't change. That thing that didn't change is that I didn't need new, better, and different anymore. I was able to look at what was right in front of me. Remember that girl from the hospital that we talked about a couple times? That's her in the middle there. We got married, and those are our kids, and we have a fantastic family. And today I work for USA Beach Volleyball, and I coach the under-19 youth players to fulfill their dreams and chase after what matters to them. It's great not having to chase after these new, better things, and now I can focus on a different temple, the one that's mine, and it's not a temple of doom. Thank you so much.
Hello, I can't see any of you. So I am a literature professor at UC San Diego and a poet. And so I'm not quite sure what I'm doing here, unless poetry is a kind of simulation, and maybe to some extent it is. I don't have any slides or anything to cue me over there, so we'll just see how this goes. 10 years ago, in 2006, I started noticing some odd changes in my body, nothing that disturbed me very much, although it should have. For instance, I was growing a little mustache, and I thought that was irritating, but I thought, well, maybe this is what it's like to be postmenopausal. I tried electrolysis, but that hurt. So eventually I did go to my doctor. You know, I delayed, but I went. And she did a blood test and then a CT scan, which showed a big tumor on my adrenal gland, or rather, I should say, where one of my adrenal glands had been. It was, they said, the size of a grapefruit. Those of you who are doctors out there, I want to ask, you won't be able to answer, but why do they always compare tumors to fruit? I don't know. But this one was similar to a grapefruit. And it was putting out hormones, which were sort of testosterone-like, ergo the mustache. So once I found that out, the first thing I did, of course, was Google my symptoms, like everyone does. And I was able to figure out what I probably had. And you know, lots of times you're wrong when you try that, but I happened to be right. I had something called adrenal cortical cancer. So if you're doctors out there, you know how amazing it is that I'm standing here 10 years later, because that is almost always fatal. And it's also very, very rare. Most people know nothing about it at all. So within a couple of weeks, I was having surgery at Thornton Hospital in La Jolla. Had a very good surgeon, successful surgery. Anyway, I took with me a notebook, trying to hold on to my identity, I guess, as a writer and a poet. And so when I woke up in the ICU, after a long and rather difficult surgery, I was on oxygen and on morphine and maybe a little bit out of it, but as soon as I could, started taking notes on what included hallucinations and dreams, and then as I got better and was moved into a different hospital room, reading that I did about cancer, trying to understand cancer, which is in fact, of course, very interesting, as you probably know, and even the things on TV. It was the Bush administration, and he comes into it at a certain point. So I'm going to read the poem that came out of the hospital stay. When I give, from this book called Versed, which was published in 2009 and won the Pulitzer Prize in 2010. And a lot of it's about the cancer experience, not all of it. I don't usually read this poem, though, because it's kind of strange and raw. But I've been asked to read it by the organizers, and so I'm going to. So I apologize in advance for it being strange. But like I said, there's all kinds of stuff, including sort of hallucinatory stuff in it. So just take it as a kind of simulation. Own. Woman in a room near mine moans, I'm dying. I want to be fine. It's my body. Don't let me. Don't touch me. By definition, I'm the blip floating across my own field of vision. On closed eyes, I see the Spartan wall of the ICU covered in a scrambled hodgepodge of sticky notes, crossing one another at all angles, illegibly written over, snippets of reference, madly irrelevant. Symbolism as the party face of paranoia. Chorus of expert voices beyond my door, forever dissecting my case. But the part is sick of representing the whole. We will prevail, says the leader on multiple screens. The words are empty, but he's there inside the lie everyone believes that nothing will really change. He's become pure being, insisting only on insistence. A crowd scene of cells growing wildly by random access to stock types. Play any role you like and go on forever. Who is speaking? Able to draw blood vessels to itself by emitting a mock distress call. From deep time, patterns on my grandmother's crockery rise to cover my closed eyelids, lumpy fruits and flowers brown against a cream background. Dream that Aaron is telling friends to be quiet because he's listening to a rumble, a white noise voice from his own intestines, which he believes is telling him how to save me. Shh, he says to anyone who speaks. So that's that. It's not over. It's not over. The thing about it, drawing blood vessels to itself by emitting a mock distress call, is something I read that cancer is capable of doing. And then one more shorter poem. Of course, after I got out of the hospital, I started waiting for the cancer to recur, which was very probable. And I had to be scanned every 3 months at first. So I was constantly in suspense, right? So this prose poem I began while I was in a doctor's office waiting for her to come back with the scan results. And so, okay. Together. Now I am always perched on a metal examination table. 2 people, a doctor and a nurse, come at intervals to tell me whether I will live or die. They do this with practiced solemnity. They're smug or snug in their habits, their relative safety, of course, but that is to be expected, and I wait expectantly, even eagerly, as if I might be of some help. If the news is bad, I imagine, they will direct our attention to an area of concern. For a moment, we will lean together toward that place. So that is sort of about the isolation of the patient, but also about her longing to still be part of community, and in this case, the medical community, because that's part of the human community. And I don't really think that the doctors are smug, etc., but it's true that for the patient, this result is everything. For the doctor, it's an area of concern, something to be sympathized with and then moved on from. So the extent to which you can actually be one and come together in the moment is finite. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
All right, let's have one more round of applause for all of our storytellers today. Thank you. We're wrapping up right now. Real quick reminder, please join us immediately after this down in the Discovery Hall for the ribbon cutting. But I'd like to share a quote with you that I literally just found 20 minutes before this began. This is from a writer named Melissa Pritchard. And I think every person in this room, be it nurse, be it doctor, be it administrator, be it instructor, this is to you. What you have chosen is a profound vocation of healing, and your stories are as sacraments, as visible blessings. Be it the heart and soul of your time, not resigned to what is safe and peripheral. Try to free yourself from attachment to results, to awards, to publications, to praise, to indifference, rejection, and misunderstanding. Immerse yourself in the common ground of the universe so that your true voice, not the egotistic one that clamors vainly for power, for it will ruin you if you listen to that. Listen to your authentic voice. May that be heard. May your words illuminate your vision. Find you compassionate, attend to human suffering, and commit to its alleviation. I think that's a job we all can go through this conference committed to. And I wish you a wonderful time here for the rest of your stay in San Diego. I'd love if the storytellers could come up for one last bow together, and thank you so much for this time. Thank you. Thank you so much.